In the interests of clarity, I thought I'd spend a few moments just going through what the next 3 weeks of your research project is going to look like. So, we are all in similar positions. We've identified an area of focus, a subject. We've started to refine questions. It is possible at this point that you may look at your project proposal and come to the conclusion that it is unresearchable. Do not be concerned if that is the case. That may be the most positive and successful decision that you make throughout your entire research project. If that is what you're feeling, it is not uncommon, and sometimes it leads to the best projects that we receive. We'll discuss that at length at some time. Let's see where we're heading now. You now need to look at your chosen question and divide it into focus areas. You need to identify what we call the research processes. You need to create a logical sequence for building knowledge, have a network of target sources and a contingency plan, and start to build the credibility of your research. That's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. Specifically, in week 5, you are going to make some decisions about the focus area for your inquiry. Identify 2 or 3 main areas of focus that underpin your question. You should utilize documents alongside to record your progress and develop knowledge. And you're conducting an initial review of your focus areas by compiling the sources and annotating them. We are going to expect to see this from you: a source table, literature review records, a full source list with notes, and a progress position document. All of those are going to be provided to you in class.
Step 1. Choose a broad topic. Go with the topic that sparks your interest, since you'll be spending quite some time with it. For me, I'm thinking maybe something about social media. Step 2. Do some preliminary reading about the topic. Okay, so I've read a lot of newspaper writing about how social media negatively impacts high school students' academic performances. And they also happen to be one of the most active age groups on social media. Step 3. Narrow down to a specific niche. This way, you can make sure the research is within a feasible scope instead of something too broad to achieve in a given time frame. Since academic performance is too broad, let me narrow it down to attention span. Step 4. Identify a research problem. So we have already established that adolescents are one of the most active age groups on social media platforms. But only a scarce amount of research has been done on the effect of social media has on the younger generation's attention span. So this will be my research problem. Step 5. Write your research question. Turning your research problem into a question. And it sounds something like, what effect does daily use of Twitter have on the attention span of people in the age group of 16 to 20? Since this is a descriptive research, the research question is also descriptive. Here's a checklist for you. A good research question should be focused. Since it focuses on a single problem of Twitter's effect on the attention span of high school students, it should be researchable. That means the answer to your question can be found by collecting empirical data or through existing literature. In our case, we can go for a quantitative approach, like using eye tracking or mouse tracking to measure the attention span. It needs to be feasible. So is it doable within a certain time frame? Do you have access to the data you need or the right kind of respondents? It really depends on your situation. But for this research question, it will fit more into the time frame of a longer project. So it wouldn't be feasible for an assignment you have to hand in by the end of the month. Be specific. All the terms you use in the research question should have clear meanings. Notice how I don't use often, but daily? And instead of using adolescents, I use a specific age group. The research question should also be complex enough. If the research question can be answered with yes or no, or with easily found facts, then it's not complex enough. Last but not least, make sure a problem is relevant to your field of study or society. Well, social media is pretty much all we use now, so that's definitely relevant to society. It also targets a currently unanswered question and contribute knowledge that future research can build on. Now keep in mind, in a research paper or essay, you usually only write one research question. But for a bigger project, you can also develop multiple research questions around the same problem. For example, I can also ask, research is such a vast area that sometimes it is hard to know where to start. A good way to think of research is as a process. There are several steps in this process, and in reality, it is not linear. It helps to visualize it as an iterative cycle at any step of the process. Research process begins with the formulation of a research problem. You scope out and identify the topic you wish to research, specify the problem, and justify the importance of studying it. Then review of the literature to evaluate the theory that has been written about the topic in order to understand what has already been done, what ideas are already out there, who the experts in the area are, and the major publications in the field that you will need to cite. Most importantly, it allows you to identify the major gaps and where your research fits into this. You then develop the research questions, aims, hypotheses, or the theoretical and conceptual framework. This is a tentative answer or direction in which you believe the research will go. It provides a lens for how you will explain findings, as well as a structural map for your research journey. Then you form the research design. This involves assessing the timelines and feasibility of your research, making decisions about the type of data you need, and the methods and tools you will use to collect and analyze it. You'll need to decide on which research approach you will use, whether that be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method. If you are doing primary research that involves participants or animal testing, or looking into potentially sensitive information in secondary sources, ethics approval will need to be obtained prior to conducting your research. The data collection stage involves taking measurements, observing or gathering information, often in carefully controlled situations. Once you have all your data, you analyze and interpret your findings to identify themes or patterns. Discuss the findings and draw conclusions by evaluating your original hypotheses, aims, framework, and the research questions, with reference to the evidence in the published literature. The final step is reporting your findings. Remember, the only way that research gets disseminated or translated into action is by you telling the research community and the wider community about your findings.
The progress position document is going to be absolutely fundamental to your capacity to succeed within the research project. And again, I reiterate, it's about your thinking and your progress. State the focus area. State the research processes used to generate the data. Also identify up to 3 sources that were critical to your findings. Identify the key data and emerging findings that you've identified from these processes that helped you to resolve the focus area. Identify aspects of your focus area that have not yet been resolved, and then plan how you resolve the gaps. Describe the processes, sources, timelines that you will need to do in order to implement that resolution. This is this absolutely explicit identification of how you're going to find out that which you need to know. And you're going to become aware that once you start working with your questions, what's going to become more and more evident are the gaps in the question, the limitations of the question, and subset questions that arise from investigating your original question. This document is going to become a key document for all of you as you go through the research project. We know about referencing. All of the literature that you read needs to be completely referenced. But here, and we need to understand this collectively, this is where the marks are. What are the key ideas relevant to advancing your question and changing the direction of your research? So what the SACE board is interested in is not that you found a relevant reference, but what you have personally changed about your thinking after engaging with that relevant reference. So there's a key idea that we need to discuss. What's changed? How do you need to think differently? Okay. Second thing is links, affirmation, or conflicts with other sources. Why is this critical? The A+ criteria for the research project is all about what we call synthesis. So where do two different sources either support each other or contradict? By acknowledging those, you start to work at the highest level. A summary of the resource. Is it biased? Is it credible? Is it accurate? How relevant? Is it an ethical source? Can you see that your project is much more about your thinking in relation to a source than it is about simply restating a source's thoughts as your own?